Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the What to Expect Travel in 2024 Trends webinar. I'm Jeremy Puglisi. I'm going to be your host. I'm also going to give everybody about 30 seconds or so just to get situated and make sure that you are all comfortable and ready to go. And we will definitely also have time at the end for questions. So we're going to reserve the last 15 minutes for questions from the media. We certainly welcome your questions, so don't be shy if you do have some questions. Okay, let's officially start here. Welcome to the What to Expect Travel in 2024 Trends webinar. My name is Jeremy Puglisi. I'm the host of the RV Atlas podcast, which is going to be celebrating its 10th anniversary next year in 2024. And I'm also the co-author, along with my wife Stephanie, of Where Should We Camp Next? Where Should We Camp Next? National Parks. And coming in April 2024, Where Should We Camp Next? Budget Camping. We have a terrific panel of industry leaders for you today and thought leaders from across the industry. So on our panel today, we have Sarah Smith, who's the co-founder of the Dyrt. Hello to Sarah, and we'll get a chance to talk to all of them a little bit more in just a second. We have John Gray, the CEO of RVshare. Hello, John. We have Alyssa Ravazio, the founder and CEO of Hipcamp. And we have Toby O'Rourke, the president and CEO of KOA. So our topics for conversation today, we're going to be taking a look into the evolution of the outdoor hospitality space as we head into 2024 and diving into shifting motivators for travel, booking patterns and interests, along with the emerging role of AI and more. And as I mentioned earlier, we will have 15 minutes for Q&A at the end of our discussion. Some of our themes and topics are going to be consumer behavior, planning tactics, preferences and values, what things are remaining the same and what is shifting and changing as we head into 2024. 2024 is shaping up to be a really interesting year in the world of camping and outdoor hospitality. We're going to be talking about some destinations, including hopefully some alternative destinations to some of the most crowded and iconic spots that everybody's been wanting to visit through COVID. We'll also be talking about advancing technology with an emphasis on AI. We'll be rounding out the conversation with questions about green and EV travel and shifting demographics. So let's say hello to all of our panelists. So for our panelists, we're going to let you tell us a little bit more about yourselves, tell us about the companies that you're leading, and we want you all to answer this question as well in your intro. So the question is, what was one surprising change in your consumers' behavior that you were not expecting last year in 2023? And after you all sort of answer that question, we'll move into our expectations for 2024. Why don't we start with Sarah Smith for a little bit more of an intro and an answer to that question?
Thank you, Jeremy. It's so great to be here with all of you great panelists. My name is Sarah Smith, and I am one of the co-founders of the Dyrt, which is a comprehensive camping app and website really focused on user-generated reviews and helping campers find and book places to camp, no matter how you camp, whether it's traditional campground camping, backcountry camping, glamping, what have you. So, you know, the Dyrt, we also do a massive survey every year where we, survey our users to find out what they're thinking. And we actually just completed our 2024 survey, which is coming out early next year. But one thing that we found involved winter camping. And during the pandemic, we saw a huge increase in winter camping, I think 40% jump from 2019. And now that travelers are having all the options available to them that they used to have, any sort of recreation, we've kind of thought that number might go down a little bit, but it seems that now people have invested in the gear you need for winter camping. They've discovered the beauty and solace of winter camping. And now we're seeing that nearly a third of campers are camping in the winter. So that's one thing that we're kind of surprised by and we've been noticing.
And Sarah, you're coming at us from the beautiful state of Oregon, correct?
Yes, the rainy state of Oregon.
Okay, great. And we're going to circle back and talk a bit more about winter camping during our discussion. So how about John? John, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, about RVshare, and about something that surprised you in 2023?
Sure. So I'm John Gray, CEO of RVshare. I've been with the company for a little over 5 years. The company celebrated its 10th anniversary this year, so that's kind of, I guess I've been here half the time. The RVshare is basically the first and largest community of RV owners and renters in the world. We connect people who are looking to go on an RV trip with people who have an RV and want to turn it into a second source of income, similarly to how a Vrbo or an Airbnb connects homeowners to people who want to go on a trip. We've generated a pretty significant amount of scale in our time. We've done over 4 million nights booked through the platform, and have seen, along with everyone else in the camping industry, a tremendous growth through the recent pandemic, and kind of have now cemented ourselves as what we believe is a category of mainstream travel that will continue to be that for quite a while. What was surprising this year, and I think it's a little bit surprising that this is still surprising, but it is that many of our bookings, up to 40% of our bookings now, are coming from people who never drive or tow the RV. They're renting an RV, having it delivered to a spot at a campground, be it a Hipcamp, a KOA, or whatever, and they just show up and have their RV set up and ready for them wherever they want to be. So that the continuing growth of the delivery channel and the fact that we're getting to a spot in this business where nearly half of the people who are renting are not even driving or towing the RV is pretty amazing and surprising to me.
Great. And John, you're coming at us from Ohio, is that correct?
I'm in Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas, not even close. Well, anyway, great to have you. Thank you. How about Alyssa? Tell us a little bit more about yourself, about Hipcamp, and about something that surprised you in 2023.
Sure. Thanks, Jeremy, and excited to be here. My name is Alyssa Ravazio. I'm the founder and CEO of Hipcamp. Hipcamp's mission is to get more people outside, which we primarily do by opening access to nearly 5 million acres of private land for camping. Camping can mean tents, RVs, glamping, or structures. Most of this land, the vast majority, you can only find on Hipcamp because we've really created this community of people who want to open up their land and host new people on it. We've also started working with campgrounds this year, which has been a really exciting new development. And I believe we're now either the top or one of the top booking platforms for private campgrounds as well. And just this year, we passed 10 million nights booked through Hipcamp, which is very exciting. The trend this year that I've been most personally excited about, and we've got some pretty cool data around, is celestial events. And I'll foreshadow a bit. We've got some big celestial events in 2024 we're really excited about. But this year, everything from the meteor showers to the solar eclipse. It was not a total solar eclipse, but pretty close. We saw a 400% increase year over year in engagement around celestial events. And so I think people are just continuing to learn about all the new and exciting things they might do while they're outside. And a lot of that is, look up at the sky. So that's been an exciting trend for us.
Awesome. And to all the media listening, you're getting a little bit of a sneak peek at some things that we will dive in more and hear from the other panelists as well. And Alyssa, what state are you coming from?
I'm in California.
Okay, great. How about Toby? Toby, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, a little bit about KOA, and something that surprised you in 2023 before we move our discussion into what's ahead in 2024?
Yes. Hello, I'm Toby O'Rourke. I'm the president and CEO of Campgrounds of America, otherwise known as KOA. KOA is the world's largest network of privately owned campgrounds. We have 500 campgrounds across the US and Canada, and we've been around since 1962. We were founded and still are headquartered in Billings, Montana, which is where I'm calling in from today. In addition to our KOA network, our company also has an outdoor resort that lands more in that glamping space called Terramore. So some of the interesting things, there's many, and we'll talk about them, and some of those have been touched on already by my fellow panelists. But one thing that jumped out to me is that people are still working from campgrounds. So in 2020, we definitely saw that spike of people working remotely that continued into 2021, but that really hasn't pulled back. Over half of campers say they're working while they're on the road. And so that work from anywhere trend is still definitely affecting our business.
Awesome. And congratulations on the new corporate headquarters. Looks really, really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's move into our questions as we look ahead to 2024. So this first question is really going to be for anyone that wants to jump in on the panel. So as we look back on 2023 and ahead to 2024, we see some baseline consistencies across behavior. Mainly the demand for travel remains high. RVshare recently found that 86% of Americans plan to book as much or more travel in 2024, including 44% who aim to increase travel in the year ahead. So, how are you all forecasting bookings and travel interest for 2024 with all of that in mind? Why don't we go in reverse order here and start with Toby?
We definitely keep a pulse on how people are thinking about next year. We still see a lot of high interest in booking in camping. We saw camping grow this year. People again just starting, and so people are saying they're going to continue camping. So we keep a pretty close pulse on that. One of the trends we're keeping an eye on is that weather is significantly impacting booking patterns. So that might be shifting the booking windows and shortening those up. We saw, this summer, over 60% were canceling their plans due to weather or changing their plans due to weather and postponing. So we did see more postponing than usual and a lot of cancellations. So I just think some of the erratic weather patterns we're seeing are impacting camping. So makes planning for 24 a little more challenging, but we still see high interest and intent to camp.
That's a real wild card for travel, right? This is kind of something new in the
Right.
world, having to worry about extreme heat or things like that. How about Alyssa? How are you forecasting your bookings and travel interest in Hipcamp sites for 2024?
2024 is going to be very interesting. So we're definitely seeing very strong, healthy growth. Again, feels like a good baseline this year also was really strong, healthy growth off last year. But it's weird because, for example, with the total, there's a solar eclipse in April. Sorry, I feel like I'm going to say that in every answer, but it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. Our bookings are up for that time period over 4,000% already. So how do we forecast that? It's really hard to say. And so that's a pretty exciting, I guess, curveball in planning. And then I'll just echo what Toby said around weather. We talk about camping in the time of climate change as a very real phenomenon that's hard to understand and hard to predict. I'm not a climate scientist. I'll just share a quick story, though. We had a very weird moment this July where suddenly we saw a cancellation spike. And we're in Australia, the US, UK, and Canada, for context. And we saw cancellations spike across all countries all at once. And we assumed something had gone wrong. There was a bug, and we looked into it. And everywhere we talked to our people on the ground, they said, it's weather, it's weather, it's weather. And we're like, we can't have weather events everywhere all at the same time. Can we? Turns out we can. July is always going to be the hottest year on Earth because of our axis tilt. And we should expect July to continue to have bizarre, severe weather, which is a bummer because it's an amazing month to go camping. So yeah, it's definitely more challenging to forecast, I think, 2024 than previous years have felt. Not that COVID was easy, but
Right. We were actually in Utah during the heat wave and had a really wonderful trip that we did not cancel, but it was quite a different trip because we didn't go into Arches National Park in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
So it changed our trip quite a bit, but we still did take the trip. How about John? Tell us how you're forecasting bookings for 2024.
Yeah, so I feel really good about travel right now. I feel like we're moving demographically into a group of people who are making purchase decisions and value experiences over things. I think that's wonderful for the travel business. I've said this before, and I think it's continues to be true. It's not a new trend anymore, but the work from anywhere movement is the biggest tailwind the travel industry has seen in the past 2 decades. That is going to expand the windows with which you can travel. It's going to lengthen trips. It's going to just expose people to more of the world. And that's a wonderful thing. So, high level travel, I feel great about. Outdoor travel specifically, we had during COVID this basically slingshot effect where we, I said it at the time, we fast forwarded awareness of the category by about 5 years. And I think that's exactly what happened. And now we're kind of growing into that. You're seeing infrastructure improve in campgrounds. You're seeing it be easier to book an RV, to book a campground. We're kind of growing into the category of travel that we can be. And that's fun to be a part of. So, I'm still seeing kind of an up and to the right for travel as a broad category and outdoor travel as a more specific category. I think this past year, you saw a lot more people take international trips. And I think you'll see that come back a little bit this year, and more people prioritize, time with family and things like that. But we're projecting a good year. We have, a few things going in our favor. The eclipse, as Alyssa mentioned, which we'll talk more about later. But feeling great about it, projecting it to be a pretty good year. Just one comment on the weather piece. I think that is something that we're going to have to work through, is how do we adjust travel to extreme weather? And I was on a panel earlier this year, and we talked about this. And one of the things that I said to campground operators is, you've got to make your campgrounds better suited to when it's really hot. More water type amenities, more shuttles to a nearby river so people can go tubing, things like that. Like, we can't change the climate individually in a short term, but we can figure out how to make, as an industry, it's still a really fun time to be out and seeing the world.
That's a great point. And all four of your companies do such a great job with content creation and education through content. You've done a lot of curation and education about the eclipse. I would love to see that from all of you guys heading into 2024, is kind of helping people understand you can have a great trip, even though it's really, really hot. It's just going to be different in a couple different ways. So thank you, John. How about Sarah? What surprises did you see in 2023?
Well, just to follow up on the
How are you forecasting bookings in 2024?
Just to follow up on what everyone's been saying about the weather and the fire, in our survey in 2023, we found 1 in 6 campers had their camping disrupted. So like, we're seeing exactly the same thing when it comes to that. And you're right, it is on all of us to kind of figure out how we can still serve our camping community, and somehow work within that. As far as camping in general, I agree with everyone else here on the panel. It's just, we're not seeing it, we're not feeling it slow down, and we're definitely not seeing it in the numbers. I think, specifically, I think like the season of camping is expanding, where, like I mentioned before, more people camping in the winter, more people camping in the off season. And then also the whole working remotely thing, I think, has been huge. Like John said, I was one of them. I worked from my van with my husband for 6 months, and I do not recommend that. It's a very tight space to do that. But it was a great experience, and we learned a lot from it. But I think because people can work remotely, that's really having a big impact on people being able to work while they're camping.
All right, great answers. Anybody want to add anything else about the eclipse and how that is affecting your bookings? It did seem like several of you did talk about that. If anyone wants to add anything, just jump in. If not, we will sort of move on to the next question.
I'll jump in, Jeremy. One little tidbit I think is super interesting is that campers are way more interested in the eclipse than just general leisure travelers. So 45% of campers say they plan to view the eclipse versus just 7% of general travelers, people who don't camp. And I think it's, Alyssa started off by talking about celestial events. And I just think in general, campers appreciate the outdoors. They're drawn to these unique events outside. They're seeking them as reasons to go on a vacation or, experience the outdoors. And I just think that that's something really special about this community that the broader travel public maybe isn't really tapping into.
That's great to know. That's so interesting. Okay, let's move into the next question here. And this will be for everyone, but I won't walk through all four of you, just anybody who wants to jump in on this one. So outdoor hospitality encompasses so much, from glamping and traditional camping to cabin-style accommodations and RVing. KOA's 2023 North American Camping and Outdoor Hospitality Report found that camping and glamping accounted for 32% of all leisure travel in 2022, which is amazing. And the next number is even more amazing. 92 million US households identified as campers. With so many traditional hotel companies witnessing this exponential growth and wanting in, and many of them getting in, pushing in, how do you all evolve your offerings to stay top of mind for repeat campers while also reaching new audiences? Anyone that wants to jump in on this one?
I'll share something interesting we're seeing. So first, again, Hipcamp's traditionally been about opening access to new land where people haven't been able to camp before, and we're still doing that But we have way more campers than we have good campsites. And so this past year, we started partnering with different reservation software companies known as PMSs. So for example, NewBook or ResNexus or RMS. These are often booking systems that hotels use as well. So I'll say from our perspective, this is exciting. We think there's a lot of capacity. I think the biggest reason we don't have more people camping every year is because there aren't enough good places to go. So we're very excited about the interest and growth in the space. We see a big opportunity to grow the pie for everybody. And so for us, these are, potential partners that we would be excited to help share their offerings with our community.
Great. Anyone else? I'm also just thinking too about how like KOA has changed over the 13 years that we've owned an RV. I mean, it used to be that you'd pull in and you'd see 99% of everything was RV sites, and there'd be two rustic cabins over in the corner. That's evolved quite a lot to all of these different types of offerings. And I think that's where you see hotel industries, real estate industries looking at that saying, hey, we can do that. We might not know
Yeah,
RV, we can do that.
I agree, Jeremy. I'll jump in there. I agree. Definitely there's been a big focus in the campground industry on modernization. And, speaking about my company, like I said, we're 60 years old. And so we definitely put a big focus 10, 15 years ago on modernization. So you are seeing, amped up RV sites, you're seeing unique accommodations like cabins, you're seeing glamping accommodations, all these things that are providing unique experiences, which I think is a key in driving more people to camping. But in specific, I wanted to mention compared to hotels, is there something that hotels cannot bottle that a campground has that's very, very special? And that is the community feeling and that neighborhood experience of being on a campground. So people just become fast friends. Kids start riding bikes together. You go over to see the guy next to you's rig. You guys might sit around the fire at night and visit. You don't go knock on the hotel room next door to you and ask to see their room, or you don't go get a drink together with someone you just met in the hallway. But that community feel is something that's very unique to campgrounds. And I think that's what keeps camping very special versus hotels. And the other thing I'd add on to that is campgrounds are very, at least in my part of camping, we're very vested in like events, right? And activities on the campground. So Halloween, for example, has become a big deal at campgrounds. Some of our campgrounds have 6 or 7 Halloween weekends in the fall where people are decorating their sites, people are trick-or-treating, they're doing pumpkin contests, and people book these up a year in advance to get their site for the Halloween weekend. And a lot of campgrounds do activities every weekend in the summer, and you don't see that sort of activation at a hotel. So I love that hotels are interested in the outdoor space, but there's some very special things about campgrounds that just can't be replicated.
I think you're
So
totally,
John, go ahead, please.
I think you're totally right on this community point, Toby. And I was just going to say the thing that we need to do as an industry to help expand the community is make it easy to be a part of, because this is a very inclusive community. And making it easy to, if you don't own an RV, to rent one or to come stay in a cabin or whatever that may be, making that booking process easy, making it not feel daunting, and getting, people from the traveling public out to experience what we all know is a really high satisfaction, very sticky category, is how we make this category much, much larger.
And John, your point before about so many deliveries now in the world of RVshare is certainly, I would think, a major way that you're making things easier for consumers. You don't have to have the truck to tow the fifth wheel now to try out a fifth wheel at a campground.
Yeah, before we launched delivery, pretty much every call that we got to customer service was, wow, how do I drive the biggest thing that I've ever driven before? And now we can really remove that obstacle. And by the way, a lot of people who have an RV delivered love it. And then next time they're going to rent a drivable and go on a road trip where they go to multiple places. Like, it is a really high satisfaction category. 95% of our bookings result in a 5-star review. Like that doesn't happen in the hotel world. So the idea that people are, once you get them into this category to experience it, they're going to love it and want to come back and do it again. So it's really, we talk about positioning ourselves for the new campers, because if you position yourselves effectively for the new campers, the second and third times will kind of take care of themselves because you have the experience to rely on.
That's great. It's Toby. I can't help but think my kids love trick or treating at campgrounds, going from decorated RV to decorated RV. Doing that in a hotel and like knocking on hotel door to hotel door, it seems a little kind of like bizarre and strange. So
Yes,
great,
yeah.
great point. Anyone else on that question? We shifted there a little bit, towards making things easy for your customers. If anyone wants to jump in on that as well, ways that we're making the experience easy for people so they want to come back, please jump in, our panelists. If not, we'll kind of move on to our next question.
Jeremy,
Yes, some of
I'll jump in.
Please
I'll
do.
jump in there. I just want to mention, like Alyssa, we're also working with PMSs to try to get a more broad offering out there to the campers. The Dyrt, we really strive to be a kind of a neutral platform for campers, no matter how they camp. So, like I mentioned before, no matter what type of camping you're doing. And a few things we've done to try to make, our offering better for all the campers, listening to what they're doing and what they need is, for example, adding Wi-Fi maps, an overlay, so that for people who are working from home, from the campsite, as I experienced, knowing what kind of Wi-Fi you're going to have is really important. And then, as we all know, campgrounds getting so booked up. So many campgrounds are fully booked. So offering something we call Dyrt alerts, which will notify users when cancellations happening, so they can go book those. So doing things like that based on what we're hearing from what people are doing and how they might be camping differently than how they did before.
Great. Anybody else on that topic before we move on? I want to make sure I get everybody in.
I'll just build on that. I think what Sarah and John were describing are great solves for points of friction. And that's something we've really been talking about a lot this year, is how across the whole ecosystem, from, not just the campgrounds, but from booking sites and the RV manufacturers and RV dealers and, everything in that whole ecosystem, how are we addressing those points of friction, those things that might be difficult, particularly keeping the new camper in mind, because I am afraid we'll have drop off, right? Of this, all these people came into camping, and unless we make it very seamless for them, we're going to see drop off. So I think everybody's really started to embrace that. And those were just some great examples about how, if we can just look at every touch point of the customer journey and try to make it easy or seamless, we will continue to retain these campers.
Super great to hear. Okay, moving on to question 4. In 2023, international leisure travel hit record highs as many travelers checked off far-flung vacations. Did you all feel the impact of this on your business last year? Do you anticipate a change heading into 2024? Maybe less international travel, more domestic. How did it impact you last year? What do you think for 2024? John, did you want to lead off on this one?
Happy to. So this was definitely a great year for international travel. You saw, high level numbers of just people traveling internationally from airline stats looking like they did in 2019. You had a lot of things that kind of broke in favor of international travel, in that, a lot of cruise lines had expiring credits from during the pandemic. There's just a lot of things that push people to travel, especially to Europe and in the Caribbean this summer. So, one, great to see people getting out there and doing international travel again. I think travel builds on travel, and I'm definitely not team domestic travel or international travel. I want there to be travel of all kinds. So I think it's really good for our industry. Remember, there's also a trade-off in that people, Americans travel outside of the US, obviously, and people from outside the US travel to the US. So we'll start to see that part of the business kind of tick back up. It's always been a small part of RVshare's business, but we expect that to grow as you see more international travel coming into the US. Some stats on it. I think we did a survey, and we got that about a fourth of people plan to take more international trips next year. We also have a good leading indicator stat where we ask if people are more interested in relaxation or adventure next year. That number last year was 50-50. This year, it was about 2/3 were focused on relaxation as opposed to adventure, which also kind of is a good answer for domestic travel. We talked a little bit earlier on about the eclipse, but the eclipse is going to be one that drives people to domestic travel, specifically to domestic outdoor travel. Alyssa gave a bigger number than I have on it, but I have about a 300% lift in bookings for the eclipse relative to Memorial Day. And Memorial Day is kind of the big first holiday of the season for booking. So to see that level of interest in what is traditionally an off season is very likely to get domestic travel, and specifically outdoor domestic travel, off to a really good start. Toby mentioned this point earlier on the eclipse, but campers are more likely to travel to the eclipse. We're seeing in the general population, half of the population is willing to travel to see the eclipse. Something like 80% of the US population wants to see the eclipse. We can't get 80% of the US population to agree on anything, but they do want to see the eclipse. So, this is a great kind of unifying thing for domestic travel. It's one that our industry is going to make the most of and seek to build off of to get us off to a really good start for the year.
That's a great point on the timing. Anyone else? Did you notice the impact of international travel last year? How do you think that might change heading into 2024? Does anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, I'll just add in, as we've seen borders open up, and some countries have been slower than others, but we have a very healthy business in Australia, and we are actually seeing about twice as many Americans going to Australia and camping in Australia through Hipcamp, making that booking through Hipcamp. So we're definitely, I think, expecting to continue to see more of that. One thing that is challenging is not a lot of people want to bring their tent and their sleeping pad. I don't even think you can bring your camp stove on an airplane unless you're checking. And so it definitely makes people more interested in renting an RV. Or, booking a beautiful glamping structure like at a KOA Terramore or something. So I think there's kind of some shifting patterns there that'll be interesting to see how they play out over time. But we're definitely seeing that in the data.
Okay, great. The next question kind of connects to some of the things you're talking about and some of the things that John is talking about travelers maybe wanting more domestic travel and relaxed travel. So let's move into the next question. So we're not only seeing crowd fatigue, but also planning fatigue coming out of 2023. And I can relate to this personally. International travel paired with the pressures of social media might have driven people to overplan their vacations, making sure they get those amazing photos for social media, eat at the hottest Insta-worthy restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. In turn, we're noticing peaked curiosity and more unplanned vacations for next year. Hilton's 2024 Trends Report found that travelers are prioritizing experiences, 85% of them, with 81% looking forward to exploring the unknown. Do you foresee your consumers leaning into more spontaneity in 2024? Some travel writers are calling this surprise travel or mystery trips. I'm opening this up to everyone here because I think you probably all have something to say. So whoever wants to dive in first, please do so.
Well, I can jump in with just saying, we've been seeing a ton of interest in free camping or dispersed camping on public lands, much more than we've seen in the past years. And I think that really lends itself well to this last minute, obviously you don't need to make a reservation to do that. I think it's tricky because there's a knowledge curve that needs to happen there, and it's not something new campers can easily jump into. For me, it's my favorite way to camp. I don't like to plan camping. I like to just get in my van and go. But we did a survey, like more representative survey of the US, and we found that 31% of Americans did not even know you could camp for free. So there's definitely a learning curve that needs to happen just with the fact that you can do it. And we spent a lot of time at the Dyrt focusing on being a resource for people who want to do this sort of camping. Because again, not for everyone. You don't want to do it if you don't know what you're doing exactly, but it's a great way to be more spontaneous with camping.
Okay, great.
Our numbers on this kind of align with Hilton. We found that 3 out of 4 people want at least an element of their trip to be a surprise. People call it mystery trips. We call it take me away travel, which I kind of like better. But I think this is also something that the outdoor hospitality industry has has been onto for quite a long time. It's pretty hard to do a road trip without parts of it being surprising. And to me, that's where the fun is. You know, you go to a campground, you're probably, well, maybe not probably, but you might see a wild animal that, you know, your kids haven't seen before. And that's not something you're going to see at the Hilton. And, you know, I think, so this surprise element is already kind of built into this community. And it's great to see the mainstream of travel starting to come toward our way of thinking on this. But I think we're very well positioned to take advantage of it.
Okay,
Yeah, and I
great.
think traditional RVers, you used to not have to have reservations in advance, right? That was largely driven by this influx of all these new campers these past few years. You know, going back to 2009, a third of people were planning trips in advance or weren't planning their trips in advance. And that's dropped to less than 10% now, you know, aren't planning their trips in advance. And so I think there is a strong desire to get back to more of that spontaneity. And I think, you know, as Sarah pointed out, there's lots of options for people. There's tons of places to camp. And it's just maybe reminding people and helping people with their travel planning in unique ways so that they can have planned spontaneity, if that makes any sense. Like just opening their minds about all the different places they can camp so they can be a little more spontaneous.
And Toby, you're seeing people booking very far ahead still for 2024, correct?
Yeah, we are. We definitely are seeing, you know, people booking now for next year, a year in advance for sure. So the popularity of camping has had to drive some changes in planning, and people have to be more thinking in advance about where they're going to go and planning for it. And I agree that that is taxing. That brings in travel fatigue, and we have to figure out how to make that easier for people. Or we are going to see people just saying, I didn't plan it. I guess we won't do it this year.
Yeah, just building on that, we did an internal survey recently, and a mental health refresh or break is the #1 reason campers book with Hipcamp. That's what they're looking for. So if the travel and booking process is stressful, like we failed as a company, we failed as an industry here. It's such an important way for people to get that mental health break. I tell people on our team all the time, like, we're in healthcare. We are providing a chance for people to access mental health, physical health, and I will call out, especially on this panel with all our great media guests here, like next year obviously will be an election year. And I was just looking at some stats from 2020. 2/3 of Americans in 2020 said the election was a meaningful source of stress in their lives. And so when I look forward to 2024, I'm like, oof, there's gonna be a lot of people who are stressed, and you know, how great as an industry if we can really like come together and create spontaneity and adventure and easy ways to just take that break and reset when you need it.
When I get stressed, I book a camping trip. I think that a lot of
100%.
Americans do. Right? I love it. You're in the healthcare business. All right, I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to combine both of our AI questions. So if you guys want to say something on AI, let's do it in this one question. So now that we're discussing the urge for a seamlessly easy travel and planning process, let's dive into AI. Does your company use AI tools? If so, in what ways? And how will that evolve in 2024? If you're not using it, do you plan to incorporate it in 2024? Let's go to John first there. What are you guys doing at RVshare?
So, you know, we have a ChatGPT plugin. We are kind of carefully watching how AI is being used in trip planning and what the appetite is for using AI for trip planning and how we can be part of that. I'd say it's very, very small today in terms of the level of interest we're seeing, but we, you know, want to be on the cutting edge of that. The short-term, more realistic application of AI to the travel business and to each of our businesses, I would say, is that it reduces cost to handle customer service type inquiries because you can accumulate information quicker, you can get to responses quicker, you know, leverage large data sets and distill them quite quickly. There's a lot of business process optimization tactics that can be applied using AI, and it will definitely make the service offering that we can provide at RVshare better by reducing friction in the process of booking and then working with our team. So I'm very bullish on AI in that aspect. In terms of its travel planning, we'll see. I mean, I think we're very early days on that. We want to be, you know, investing in where this could go, but it's not a big part of our business yet.
Toby, would you like to add something there about what KOA is doing or what you might be doing
Sure.
in the near?
Sure. We did poll campers, and we see that a third of campers have used an AI tool. And so we know there's interest there. That definitely is spiking among millennials. And leaning into that, what we're doing right now is we're building our own AI assist that would go on our website that is indexing all of our blog content and our KOA.com content. So AI is only as good as the content it's indexed against. And so I think maybe the current forms that are out there, we haven't indexed all of the content to make travel planning really useful. So that's what we've been taking our time to make sure that all of our content, we do pump out a massive amount of content through our blog and the extensive information about each of our properties. So our assist tool will go against that specific content. And we actually previewed it at our convention live on stage a couple of weeks ago. We're throwing questions at it, everything from trip planning questions to RV tips, like a help me service my RV type question, to recipes or, various things like that is what we anticipate using this AI tool for. We're hoping to have that launched very soon, if not by the end of the year.
Awesome. Just a quick reminder to media that are listening, if you'd like to submit your questions now, I'm looking at giving us the last 10 minutes for questions and trying to move very briskly through a couple more questions in the next 10 minutes. Sarah, do you want to quickly provide a counterpoint here? I mean, in our prepping, you had talked a little bit about using AI in an interesting way, and I thought maybe you could share that with all of us.
Yeah, I actually, this past summer, I tried planning camping trips with 3 different AI tools, and I wrote about it for Ing Magazine, and it was a really fascinating experiment. And it kind of reminded me that camping is so complex. And I know AI will have a role to play, of course. I don't want to be one of those people you look back 20 years from now and I was saying the internet's never going to work, but it's a complex thing. And you kind of, at this point of the game, you need that personalized, Jeremy, I want to know, where did you go camping last weekend and why did you like it? Or why did you not like it? And do you think I would like it? This is precisely the reason we started the Dyrt, was because we wanted to foster that sort of community where you could communicate about that human experience. So, just to sum it up quickly, it was an interesting experience to do, but I think we're a ways away from having AI take over camping trips as far as planning them goes.
Yeah, I'll just build on what I share. Like, I think the idea of we can just ask a robot where to go camping is at least a bit way off in the distance and take some of the fun out of it, don't you think, if that's how things work in the future? But we are very excited about AI, and I think are approaching it in maybe a slightly different way. I'm like going to AI hackathons on my weekends right now just to communicate like the level of AI excitement over here. For us, it's really about personalization. So we're not saying, hey, stop using Hipcamp, go use this chatbot. What we're saying is our core role is matchmaking. You come to Hipcamp, if I know you've got, a big RV, why am I showing you these tent sites you can never access? And so we're really looking at AI as a way to improve our matchmaking capacity, whether that's by, really understanding which listings to show you, or kind of processing the reviews so you can see the data point that matters the most to you, or choosing the photo that's going to be the most helpful for the question you're likely to have. So that's been really fun and really effective for us. But again, I think it's a little different than this idea of the chatbot right now.
Okay, great. I'm going to make the painful decision to skip question 8 and go to question 9 because our time's a little bit short. So are all of you seeing that a lot of travelers want to try different places in 2024, that people are maybe shying away from going to the most iconic bucket list type destinations and looking for alternatives, which some people in the travel industry are calling dupes, affordable or alternative options that are just as good, but a bit less crowded and undiscovered. What are everybody's thoughts there? Are you seeing a shift away from these incredibly popular national parks and destinations to people looking for places that are less crowded and perhaps easier to get reservations? Anybody who wants to jump in?
I can go. Oh, go ahead,
ahead.
Sarah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, I think we're probably all going to have some similarities in our answers here, in that, there's just so much fatigue with these national parks and everything being so fully booked all the time, we put together a list of like the hardest to book campgrounds. And then Outside Magazine actually asked us if we could put together a list of the easiest or, alternatives to that. And it's amazing how many amazing, great places there are to camp just outside national parks. You might have to just dig a little bit harder, go a little bit further to find that information. But we found 15 different campgrounds, all on public lands, but not in national parks, that have amazing places and are more available, and you can book them. So just, thinking a little bit outside of the box to find other possibilities when you're looking to camp.
Yeah, and
Anyone
I
else?
was going to
Go ahead.
offer up that what's been very consistent in our research over the past 10 years of the North American Camping Report is that 70% of people camp within 100 miles of home. So yes, the destination trips are great, but there are so many places to camp that are nearby. And I think that's why camping's so popular. You can easily have a weekend getaway or, a 3-day holiday. You don't have to go very far. And, I think state parks are great places to look for. And even just campgrounds in your local community provide a perfect place for a staycation where you don't really have to go very far and can still have a great vacation. And that's why we also see camping surge in popularity during times of economic downturns, because it is affordable. You don't have to take a big vacation across the country, and it's accessible to a lot of people.
The other thing to build on with this point is it can be great close to home. We looked at our satisfaction scores, which I mentioned earlier, are already very high for the travel industry. But if you look at them for bucket list type trips where you're going a long way to go to something compared to staying close to home, the satisfaction scores are identical. So people are having just as good of a time if they are going, to a state park nearby and spending a good time out under the stars with their family, as they are if they're going to, Yosemite for the first time.
Good to know. Anybody else on that topic, or shall we move to our last question before Q&A? Okay, let's go ahead, please, Alyssa.
I was just going to chip in one specific example that's been really popular for us right now. There are areas we've seen that are close to but different from these big destinations, like Lake Tahoe, big destination in the Bay Area. Well, there's this beautiful place kind of on the way to Tahoe called Apple Hill in El Dorado County that's like gorgeous and has this huge apple festival every fall. And so we've been really kind of intentionally trying to like redistribute demand a little and being like, Tahoe's going to be crazy, but what about this? And that's been really exciting for people. And I just think as an industry that, I think everyone here is doing this and just continuing to, educate people. Like, the big national parks like Zion or Yosemite, they don't just pop out of nowhere. Like, it's beautiful all around them too. And the more we can get people going to, I think, new places and different places, the better.
Couldn't agree more. All right, let's answer question 10 kind of briskly, and then we'll get to our Q&A. So innovative green alternatives and modes of transportation have been a growing factor for travelers to consider. With the rise of awareness, how is your business working with EVs or other green practices? And is this a message you really want to communicate with customers more in 2024? If we could just all offer up maybe some brief answers to this, or just whoever wants to comment.
I'd say early days, we've done a few partnerships in the area, one with Grounded, one with Lightship, to make EV RVs available on the platform. We think this is an emerging part of the RV business. You've seen the OEMs spend a good amount of money on it. I expect that consumer demand will be there for it. And again, we want to be kind of early to the party on helping these develop, but it's very early days. There's not a ton of these out there yet.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
Yeah, I really believe that campgrounds can play a really big role in helping address charging infrastructure needs across the country, particularly in rural areas. And so we've been doing some advocacy work in that area and partners with various groups in lobbying efforts around more grants to businesses in rural areas so that they can get charging infrastructure in. We've got some good partnerships. There's some unique product out there that actually allows dual charging. So if someone pulls in a car, let's say, and they're pulling an RV, but they have maybe the electric car, is pulling an RV, you can actually charge both. It's a dual pedestal. So we have some of those going in on our campgrounds. our goal is to get chargers first at the store or a public accessible area to serve people traveling in electric cars right now. And then we're working on our build out of RV sites that will accommodate RV charging, whether that's for the vehicle pulling the electric RV or for the electric RVs themselves that are just around the corner.
Okay, great. Anyone else want to quickly comment before we move to Q&A?
I'll be quick, Jeremy, promise. I just want to build on Toby's point. I think campgrounds have a huge role to play here, absolutely in EV infrastructure, but also in tackling this broader problem of climate change and biodiversity loss. We've lost 70% of our biodiversity since 1970. So like we're not in a great spot right now. And I think the outdoor industry can play a huge role here because campgrounds have land, they have trees, they can plant flowers for pollinators. So we've been doing some really cool projects such as Project Monarch, where we're actually educating all of our campground hosts along the monarchs migration pathway, how to support monarchs, what plants to use, what pesticides not to spray. And I just think that's a really important part of this conversation as well. Reducing carbon is important, but not enough to solve our situation today.
Great. Okay, let's move into the Q&A portion here. And Caroline Casey, I love your question because it is basically the question that I skipped, question 8. So thank you. I'm so happy. So Caroline wants to know, do any of you foresee major demographic shifts in 2024, particularly toward younger generations? And that was literally question 8. So I'm feeling much better now that we get to talk about that. So anybody that wants to jump in.
I can start. We definitely have seen camping continue to trend younger over the past, 7 to 10 years, and also more diverse. Over half of all people who camp right now are from non-white groups. So that trend or new campers. Over half of people who camp that were new last year are from non-white groups. We'll continue to see that trend continue. And we will also continue to see younger groups. We're seeing a lot of Gen Z coming up and entering into this camping landscape. So whereas everybody wanted to talk about millennials for so long, we're trying to focus a lot of attention now on that Gen Z group so that we can continue to get them interested in camping and then turn them into lifelong campers. So absolutely, I think the trends will continue younger and more diverse.
And Toby,
Great. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Yeah, Toby, I think you shared data on this a few weeks ago, but I've definitely seen data around Gen Z caring a lot more about sustainable travel too. So I would expect that to be, yeah. So all the trends we've seen around people starting to ask questions around, hey, what kind of impact are you having here? And what materials are those? Gen Z is like 11 out of 10 on that spectrum. And I think they're going to continue to drive just a huge shift there, which we're excited about.
I mean,
okay.
The other thing I would say,
go ahead, John.
Just with younger demographics, they expect it to be really easy to book. They expect it to be easy to, arrive and experience. We need to make sure our campgrounds have great Wi-Fi. We need to make sure our campgrounds, are easy to set up from a booking check-in experience, and that, the RVs or whatever that you're taking to the campground needs to be easy to book as well. So the call to arms for our industry is to make it simple. That's how you continue to move down the demographic chain. Okay,
great. If anyone else wants to jump in, just let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to move to a question from Karen Cicero. Hello to Karen. It's Karen Cicero from Good Housekeeping. Her question: among your guests who are traveling with kids, what kinds of lodging are they most likely to book? Tent camping, RVs, cabins, etc. Are there some cool new options available? Anybody that wants to jump in on our panel, please do so.
I don't want to dominate, but I feel like I'm jumping in quickly. Sorry, but yes to all the above. We see families in all of categories, and I think everyone probably has seen the same. Definitely saw a lot of families buying RVs these past couple of years and doing RV travel. The majority of people who camp, about half of people who camp, are in tents, so that continues to be a popular form of travel for families. But the biggest probably increase over the past few years has been in accommodations. So cabins and a lot of these unique accommodations that are coming out, such as tree houses and yurts and canvas tents, and lots of options on campgrounds now to provide these unique experiences, which we see these younger families really gravitating towards. They can create these unique memories for their family.
I would just say RVs are amazing for families. A drivable RV, you can be, your family can be playing cards while one person's driving, and you can be sitting around the table talking to each other and be seat belted in, So that is, they're kind of made for family travel. On RVshare, we book a lot of Class C RVs, which have a sleeping capacity that is usually for a family, right? It's not just for a couple of people. We also book a lot of towable RVs that have multiple bed or multiple sleeping areas for, typically families with kids. I'll tell you just one experience we've seen a lot more of recently is with these delivered RVs. People are having an RV delivered that they couldn't tow themselves. So they'll get a fifth wheel that'll have, 2 separate bedrooms. So kids are in one area, parents are sleeping 20 feet away. And that's just a completely different and meaningfully better experience for experiencing the outdoors.
Great. If anyone else wants to jump in, do so. Otherwise, I'm going to move to about 2 more questions here. We have a question from Jason Epperson from RV Miles. Is new campsite and campground construction growing enough to meet the demand for campsites yet? And Toby, don't apologize if you're the first one to jump in.
We definitely are seeing a lot of investment in building new campgrounds, more than ever. There's money coming in to build campgrounds. People are seeing this as a very lucrative and promising category. So there's, the REITs are playing here, a lot of bigger investment groups, a lot of private equity. So I do think we're going to see a lot more campgrounds, a lot more camp sites being expanded. That said, I'd also like to comment that part of this demand or supply issue we have in meeting demand is in quality of RV sites. So it has been promising that the government is funneling money towards improvement of some of our public lands and the parks in our the sites in our national parks and in our state parks, because that's a lot of those sites are very old and they just don't meet the needs of today's RV. So that's already cutting down our number of available sites. So the more we can continue to improve a lot of the sites we have, particularly in our public parks, the more we're going to be able to meet demand.
I personally find it heartbreaking to see the condition of some of our National Park Service campgrounds. My mind goes to the Blue Ridge Parkway. I mean, there's been no work done on them for decades. Anyone else want to comment there on that question?
Yeah, I can share. So the Department of Commerce just released a report, I think a couple of weeks ago. The outdoor recreation industry is now over $1 trillion. That's more than oil and gas. That's more than mining. I believe that's more than pharmaceuticals. So this is like big business for the United States. And I think we need to be funneling more investment, certainly into our public lands, but also, our private campgrounds as well, and figuring out how to do that in a way that's, thoughtful and takes into account local communities and environmental impact. But from the data we're seeing, I don't think supply is keeping up with demand. I'll actually quote a KOA report here. I think this was 2022, that over half of campers who started camping in the past couple of years are going to camp less often due to overcrowding. And so to me, this is the biggest, problem or challenge kind of facing us today. One unique approach Hipcamp takes is campgrounds are amazing. And I love hearing about like the Halloween trick-or-treating and the community element. Like you really can only get that at a campground. But we're also very optimistic on a kind of a newer category of camping called low impact camping. This tends to be like 2 or 3 or 4 campsites, a little less infrastructure, lower impact, but often easier from a permitting standpoint to make happen. And so that's one interesting new trend we're seeing in ways people are kind of maybe trying to meet this rise in demand and hopefully grow the industry overall.
Great. If anyone else wants to jump in, do so. Otherwise, I'm going to move to a question from Anita Cooper. I'm going to try and get in 2 more questions. Anita wants to know if any of you anticipate an increase in glamping for 2024. I think I know the answer, but anybody who wants to jump in and talk about an increase in glamping, please do so.
Yes, for sure. I mean, people are going to be renting RVs with better amenities. They're going to expect more amenities of the campgrounds where they go. And that is a trend of travel that has, as you move more into mainstream travel and out of traditional kind of RV and outdoor travel, the requirement to have good amenities is going to go up and up. That's a part of the industry that we can bring in there and likely will move to all sorts of camping down the line. So one that we're excited to serve, but definitely up for next year and probably for the next 10.
Okay,
Totally.
great. Anybody else? Glamping, please.
Just totally agree with what John said, and I see Alyssa nodding, but definitely going up.
Okay, great. Anyone else want to talk about glamping? If not, one last question. All right, it's 2:00. We can wrap up close to on time. This is an anonymous question here. Although we've pretty much returned to normalcy post-COVID, what do you see as behaviors from then that may remain for a long time or forever, besides flexible work and remote abilities? Do you see any things that kind of became cemented as trends during COVID that are becoming permanent?
I think part of what we just talked about, the glamping, I just think the variety of camping options that we have out there now, from free dispersed camping to this extravagant, wonderful glamping. I just think this diversity, this wide range of options is something that's going to stick around.
It's a great answer. Something positive and optimistic coming out of COVID is the explosion of American camping. Anybody else, please?
I mean,
I
the
would,
for me is we exposed tens of millions of people to outdoor recreation that hadn't been exposed to it before. And this is a really high satisfaction category, as I've said before. So these people are going to come back. They're going to teach their kids about it. They've built memories that they're going to have for the rest of their lives, and they're going to pass on for generations. I mean, to me, that's as good as it gets and as good as you can hope for coming out of a pandemic. Specifically, I think Wi-Fi is a requirement now. That is something going into the pandemic that, most people wanted to get off the grid. Now we see it as basically a requirement. We work to put it on the RVs. We, work with campgrounds to put it in place. That's something that's not going to change. Shoulder seasons are just far more part of the conversation than they were before. It's great to travel in fall foliage, but, I couldn't because I had to go to my job. Well, if your job's remote now, you can do that. So I think the seasons are longer, the lengths of stay are longer, and Wi-Fi is a requirement.
Great. What great answers. I'm so glad I forced this last question in over the 2:00 mark. Anybody else want to jump in as we wrap up here?
I would. I think that the reason people turned to the outdoors during COVID was in part due to hotels were closed, but also for mental health. And I don't think that's changed at all. Our society, we talked about the elections earlier, people are very busy. There's a lot of stressors. And if people got a taste of that mental health benefit of being outdoors in COVID, they're returning to that and they're going to stick with that. So I think that we'll see more of that wellness trend and connection with the outdoors to address mental health as we head into 2024.
Alyssa, we're in the healthcare business here, right?
Yeah, Toby said exactly what I was going to say. Like, people fell in love with nature. They realized how good it made them feel. It was such a stark contrast to being locked in your home. And they're not going to forget, right? That feeling lasts. So I think that's a big boom that will continue.
All right. Thank you so much to everyone, to our panelists, to Sarah Smith from the Dyrt, John Gray from RVshare, Alyssa Ravazio from Hipcamp, and Toby O'Rourke from KOA. And thank you to all the media that joined us for the What to Expect Travel in 2024 Trends webinar. I'm Jeremy Puglisi. That was really fun. Thank you all so much. I really enjoyed the conversation, and wishing you all a great 2024. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.